For centuries, we have been taught to imagine angels like this, beings of light with human faces, delicate wings, and expressions of peace. Gentle figures, almost familiar, almost comforting, an image that is easy to accept, easy to understand, but incomplete. Because when we return to the ancient accounts, when we look at the original descriptions, that image begins to collapse. Angels were not described as beautiful. They were described as overwhelming, inexplicable, incomprehensible. Beings that defied the very logic of form. And there is one detail that repeats itself. Whenever an angel appears before a human being, the first thing it says is always the same. Do not be afraid. But why? Why would a creature sent by God need to say that? What exactly were people seeing? Perhaps it was not beauty. Perhaps it was something far beyond that. Something the human mind was not made to process. Because in the presence of the Creator, even the messengers of light do not look like what we expect. And today, we go beyond paintings, beyond interpretations, beyond what we were taught. Today, we will look directly at the celestial hierarchy. And I guarantee you, this will completely change everything you imagine about angels. If there is a point where the human mind begins to break before the unknown, it is here. At the absolute pinnacle of the celestial hierarchy, a level where language is no longer sufficient, where form no longer explains, and where everything we call reality ceases to apply. Here, we are not talking about angels who walk among men, nor messengers, nor warriors, nor beings who descend to earth with a mission. We are speaking of those who exist before the very throne of God, so close to glory that their very existence is shaped by it. They do not serve as we understand service. They do not obey orders like ordinary creatures. They do not communicate through language. They exist in function of presence, and what they are cannot be fully comprehended by a mind limited to time and matter. Because here, there is no distance between creature and worship. The first are called the Seraphim, and the very name already reveals something terrifying. The burning ones, but not as a poetic metaphor, not as simple symbolism. They are fire, conscious fire, living fire, fire that does not destroy, but purifies everything that approaches. As described by the prophet Isaiah, they do not possess a fixed form as we know it. Their presence is wrapped in flames that seem to exist beyond natural laws, flames that do not consume matter, but reveal what is worthy and what is not. Each one has 6 wings. With 2, they cover their faces, because even as celestial beings, not even they can fully endure the absolute glory of God. With 2, they cover their feet, a gesture of reverence so profound that it surpasses any human concept of humility, and with 2, they move. But they do not fly like creatures of the sky. They move as if space itself bends around them, as if creation itself recognizes who they are. And they do not speak, they do not converse, they do not exchange words. They proclaim, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts." And this is not an empty repetition. It is a continuous declaration, an eternal vibration, a sound that does not merely echo, but sustains the order of heaven. As if, the moment that praise were to cease, the entire structure of reality would cease with it. But if the Seraphim are fire, the next are absolute perception, the Cherubim. And here, human logic does not merely fail, it completely shatters. Because they were not made to be understood, they were made to see, and to see everything at once. They do not have a single face. They have 4: man, lion, ox, eagle. 4 expressions, 4 natures, 4 dimensions of perception coexisting within a single being. The man, consciousness; the lion, authority; the ox, strength and service; the eagle, higher vision. They do not look in different directions. They see all directions, simultaneously. Their bodies are covered with eyes. Not dozens, not hundreds, but a number beyond human counting. Eyes that never close, eyes that do not need rest, eyes that pierce through matter, time, intention. Nothing escapes, nothing is hidden, nothing goes unnoticed. They do not merely observe creation. They perceive reality in its entirety, all at once, and they are the ones who guard. They were placed at the entrance of Eden, after the expulsion of Adam and Eve. They guarded the way to the tree of life. They guard what cannot be accessed until it is permitted. They guard the presence. They guard the boundaries between the sacred and what has been separated from it. And then, something even harder to comprehend. Something that does not even possess a recognizable form. The thrones, also called the Ophanim. Here, there is no face, no wings, no body. Nothing that resembles anything human. They are described as wheels. Wheels within wheels, interwoven in an impossible structure, turning in directions that make no sense, yet never changing position, never stopping, never losing control. As described by the prophet Ezekiel, each of these wheels is covered with eyes. Eyes within, eyes without. Eyes on every surface, every layer, every direction. Nothing is beyond their reach. Nothing is beyond their perception. They do not walk. They do not fly. They do not descend, nor ascend. They move. Like a living mechanism of divine will, like invisible gears, in a system that sustains all creation, as if they were part of the very structure of the universe, as if they were the movement of God in action. And at this point, an inevitable question arises. If these are the beings closest to God, if this is the form of those who dwell in His presence, then perhaps the problem was never the appearance of angels. Perhaps. The problem is our human expectation that the divine should look like us. And this is only the beginning. If the first sphere revealed beings that dwell directly in the presence of God, the second shows us something different. Here, heaven is not only contemplation, it is structure, it is organization, it is authority in motion. It is where the invisible begins to move toward the world. At the top of this sphere are the dominions, also called the dominations. Unlike the Seraphim or Cherubim, the scriptures do not give us a detailed visual description of these entities. Neither in the Bible, nor in texts such as the Book of Enoch or the Book of Jubilees, is there a clearly defined form for them. And that alone already says a lot, because the dominions are not known by their appearance, but by their function. They govern, they organize, they establish order among the lower hierarchies. If we try to imagine their form, theological traditions, especially those influenced by Pseudo-Dionysius, the Areopagite, suggest beings of imposing presence, surrounded by light, often associated with scepters, orbs, or symbols of authority. But that does not come from direct vision, it comes from interpretation. Because unlike the creatures of the first sphere, the dominions were not described in detailed visions. They operate without being seen. Below them are the virtues. And once again, we encounter silence in the descriptions. The Bible does not describe their form. The apocryphal texts do not detail their appearance either. But they attribute to them something powerful: movement, force, intervention. The virtues are associated with the manifestation of divine power in the universe. If something extraordinary happens, if the laws of nature seem to bend for a moment, if a miracle takes place, it is their action that many traditions suggest is at work. Visually, they are often represented as beings radiating energy, pulsing light, almost as if they were made of force in its purest state. But once again, this is a human attempt to represent the invisible, because there is no concrete description, perhaps because their form is not static. And then we arrive at the powers, and here something changes. Although there is still no detailed physical description in Scripture, their role becomes much clearer. The powers are described as forces of restraint, guards, spiritual warriors. In some interpretations, especially in deeper readings of texts like the Book of Daniel, we see indications of conflicts between spiritual forces, such as the Prince of Persia, resisting a heavenly messenger. This suggests something important. There is opposition, there is resistance, there is conflict, and the powers stand at the center of it. If we try to visualize them, they are often represented as beings with spiritual armor, carrying weapons not made of matter, but of authority, swords that do not cut flesh, but influence, shields that do not block blows, but invisible forces. But again, this is symbolic construction, because what we know for certain is not what they look like, it is what they do. And perhaps this is the most unsettling aspect of this sphere. Unlike the first, where the strangeness comes from form, here the mystery comes from its absence. We do not know exactly what these beings are like, because perhaps they were never meant to be seen. But we know what they do. They govern, they release power, they fight. And this reveals something that completely reshapes our understanding of heaven. Heaven is not merely a place of continuous worship. It is a system, an active structure, a kingdom in constant operation. Because if there are rulers, it is because there is something to be governed. If there is power being released, it is because something is being influenced. And if there are warriors, it is because there is a war. And this war does not happen only in distant places. It is not confined to heaven. It touches reality. It crosses the invisible and reaches the world we know. And then the inevitable question arises, if these forces are in action all the time, if decisions are being made beyond our perception, if battles are being fought without us seeing them, how far does this really go? And the most unsettling question of all, could it be that, at this very moment, something is happening around us, without us having the slightest idea? If the higher spheres seem distant, abstract, almost unreachable, the third is different, because it is here that heaven touches earth. The first of this sphere are the principalities, also known as celestial princes. Unlike the higher orders, there are clearer indications of their activity in Scripture. In the book of Daniel, we find one of the most intriguing passages in the entire Bible. A heavenly messenger describes being resisted for 21 days by an entity called the Prince of Persia, not a human king, but a spiritual being. This suggests something profound. Nations are not influenced only by human decisions. There are forces operating behind the scenes. The principalities are connected to territories, to peoples, to structures of power. They do not appear before ordinary individuals. They operate on a large scale, influencing the course of civilizations, guiding or contending. But when we try to understand their appearance, once again, we encounter silence. The Bible does not describe what they look like. The apocryphal texts do not provide clear details either. What we have are interpretations. Many representations show majestic figures surrounded by light, sometimes positioned above cities or regions, as if observing everything from above. But that is symbolic, because in reality, perhaps their form is not something fixed. Perhaps it is something the human mind could not sustain. Below them are the Archangels, and here, everything changes. Because unlike the other orders, some names are known, like Michael the Archangel, the warrior, and Gabriel, the messenger. The Archangels are sent in critical moments. They do not appear often, but when they do, something is about to change. Michael is described as the one who fights. In the book of Revelation, he leads a battle against forces of rebellion, a war in heaven, not symbolic, real. Gabriel, on the other hand, appears bringing decisive messages. It was he who announced events that would change history. Not just information, but declarations of destiny. Unlike the higher orders, the archangels often assume more comprehensible forms, human appearances, but carrying something impossible to ignore: presence, authority, weight. And even so, those who encounter them are still afraid. And then, we arrive at the closest level of all, the angels, the messengers, the guardians, those who, according to many traditions, walk among us. They are the ones who appear in common biblical accounts, guiding, protecting, warning, and unlike the higher orders, they often take on human form, so human that sometimes they are not recognized. As suggested in the Epistle to the Hebrews, some have entertained angels without knowing it. But even here, there is something we cannot ignore, because whenever their true nature is revealed, fear returns. The human reaction is always the same: falling, silence, trembling. Because no matter how close they are, they still belong to another level of existence. And this leads us to an inevitable conclusion. If there are beings who influence nations, others who deliver messages that change destinies, and others who walk beside ordinary people, then the line between the visible and the invisible is not as distant as it seems. Perhaps it is being crossed all the time. And the question that remains is, how many times has something been beside you, watching, protecting, or even intervening? without you ever realizing it. Up to this point, we have seen order. We have seen hierarchy. We have seen beings that exist in perfect submission to the divine will. Beings that do not question, do not deviate, do not fail. But there is a part of this story that cannot be ignored. A part that was left in the margins, between the lines, in fragments that crossed generations. Because not all remained in the light. Not all remained before God. And this raises an even greater question. If everything was created by Him, if all celestial order proceeds from His will, how can there be a fall? Among the ancient texts that preserve this account, one of the most intriguing is the Book of Enoch, an ancient record that expands what is already implied in the scriptures. It is not part of the canon of most traditions, but it echoes a reality that cannot be ignored. There we find the Watchers, angels who observed the earth, who contemplated creation from a distance. But at a certain moment, something changed. They did not only observe, they desired. And in that instant, harmony was broken. They descended, not sent, not commissioned, but by their own choice. And in doing so, they crossed a boundary that was not merely physical, but spiritual. They brought knowledge. They taught humanity what had not been permitted. Secrets of creation, mysteries of matter, knowledge that, at that time, belonged only to God. But knowledge without submission does not produce light. It produces corruption. They mingled with humanity. They generated offspring. And from this union came the Nephilim, powerful beings, imposing, but also violent. And the earth was filled with disorder. But here is the point many ignore. None of this happened outside of God's knowledge. None of this escaped His control. None of this surprised the Creator. Because the existence of the fall does not mean the absence of sovereignty. It means that even rebellion exists within established limits. The scriptures do not describe in detail the appearance of these angels after the fall. Neither the Bible, nor the Book of Jubilees, nor even the Book of Enoch reveal their final form. And perhaps that is intentional, because the focus was never their appearance. It was the consequence. And even so, we can reflect. If the beings closest to God already possess forms that completely defy human logic, beings made of fire, covered in eyes, with multiple faces, moving beyond the laws of matter, what happens when something like that moves away from the source of all order? Because God is not only creator, He is the very reference of order, of meaning, of structure. Without Him, there is no balance. Without Him, there is no harmony. So, when a celestial being moves away from God, it does not merely change position. It loses alignment with what sustains it. And perhaps that is what creates distortion. Not just a moral change, but a rupture in its very essence. Perhaps the light did not simply disappear. Perhaps it was twisted, fragmented, corrupted, and the result would not be merely an evil being, but something outside its original purpose, something misaligned, something that no longer reflects the Creator, yet still carries traces of what it once was. And that is what makes everything even more unsettling. Because the war we mentioned is not only between good and evil, it is between order and chaos, between alignment and rupture, between what remains in God and what has moved away from Him. And that war continues, not as an uncontrolled conflict, but as part of a reality that is still being guided. Because in the end, everything still answers to Him, and that changes everything. Because it means that even in the midst of darkness, even in the midst of rebellion, even in the midst of what has fallen, God still reigns. Light still defines what is true. Order still prevails over chaos. And perhaps that is exactly why what is in the darkness still moves, still tries, still resists, because it knows there is a limit, and that limit was not defined by them, but by God. And this brings us to the final question. If all of this is happening, if there is an invisible reality active around us, if there are forces in motion, aligned, or in opposition, then the real question is not only what exists out there, but where are you within all of this? And if for a moment that reality were fully revealed, would you see only angels? Or would you realize that there has always been much more than you ever imagined.
My team, we appreciate your views. We appreciate you watching from on daily scriptural verses. We promise to keep you updated with new daily scriptural verses as you continue to watch from this channel. I love you and Jesus loves you all.